The Diocese of Paisley podcast comes to you today from a very noisy Via della Conciliazione in Rome, the main street leading up to St. Peter's Square and St. Peter's Basilica, where on Christmas Eve, Pope Francis opened the first of the Holy Doors, marking the start of the Jubilee 2025 Year of Hope. More than 30 million pilgrims are expected in Rome over the course of the year, including our pilgrimages from the Diocese of Paisley. If you are coming on pilgrimage, what can you expect? How can you prepare to get the most from your visit? And if you are unable to travel to Rome, what are the dioceses being encouraged to do to ensure everyone can participate in the great Jubilee year? Well, to answer those questions and more, I'm here to speak to Rolando Streber, official of the Dicastery for Evangelisation. Rolando, thank you for agreeing to speak to the Diocese of Paisley podcast today. Rome is buzzing and Rome looks ready to welcome the anticipated 30 million plus pilgrims. What's been involved in the huge planning process prior to Pope Francis opening the St. Peter's Holy Door on Christmas Eve?
Yeah, for an event of this magnitude that lasts for a whole year, there's been so many preparations taking place, from infrastructure all the way to event planning, and of course the spiritual components like indulgences and all that. So there's so many moving parts, and one of the most visible ones is all the construction work that went around Rome, and the restoration of certain art pieces, statues outside, bridges, and new squares for people to gather in and for events to take place in, and all things like that. There's also the spiritual side of things where, for example, like I said, the indulgence, the penitentiary, apostolic penitentiary, put out the guidelines for how to obtain indulgence. Here in the Jubilee offices, we've also been very busy preparing each and every event, down to the details of the program, and most of all, also the spiritual preparation. Pope Francis had declared it the year prior as a year of prayer. A year of prayer. Why prayer? Because that's how we prepare for the pilgrimage component of the Jubilee, which is meant to symbolize the pilgrimage that we're in our daily lives.
The Jubilee doesn't come about often, every 25 years, of course. What is the history of the Jubilee? Where does it have its roots?
Yeah, so the Jubilee goes all the way back to the year 1300 with Pope Boniface VIII, where upon request of the people of Rome, the faithful of Rome had requested an event to remember Jesus' life and our redemption, of course. And it was meant to remember that, marking I believe it was 50 years at first, every 50 or 100 years, to mark and proclaim a holy year for the people to be able to experience mercy. That was the idea from the very beginning. So at the beginning, it was all about pilgrimage to Rome, coming to Rome as a pilgrim and going to each of the papal basilicas to obtain the indulgence. And so pilgrimage has been at the center of the Jubilee from the very beginning. Then it changed over the years. It went, like I said, from every 50 years. There were some that were offbeat, if you will. And then it settled in every 25 years, which is what we find ourselves in now, where every 25 years the Pope calls in a holy year. And in 2025, we're in the year of hope.
So as you've just said, this year's Jubilee 2025 is entitled A Year of Hope in a World of Crisis. What is the thinking behind the theme this year?
Yeah, the theme was chosen by Pope Francis. as part of a response, if you will, to the current state of the world. In the Bull of Benediction, where the Pope calls in the Jubilee, he mentions the wars happening around the world, and one of the first signs of hope being peace. And then he goes on to talk about different signs of hope, for young people, for migrants, for everybody, pretty much everybody. And so, yeah, that's the idea behind it, looking out into the world, and not only at wars, but also, the internal lives of people and the kind of society that we're in. We're swamped by technology, basically, disrupting our lives every single day. There's so much noise, I mean to say. And the hope that we can once again encounter Christ in the busyness of our lives and the chaos of war, but also in the chaos of things that happen in our daily lives that make us perhaps even forget about prioritizing our relationship with Christ.
We have dozens of pilgrims coming from the Diocese of Paisley. What should they be doing to prepare to get the most out of their pilgrimage?
I think the model established in preparation for the Jubilee year itself is great. I think praying, putting prayer at the center of your life, if whether you have a consistent prayer life or not, I think it's a great opportunity before coming to Rome to try and maybe get in. If you don't pray at all, then maybe start with 10 minutes a day, to make some space in your heart and in your mind to try and listen to God's voice and try and listen to what he might want to give you as part of this pilgrimage to Rome. It is the year of hope, after all, as we mentioned earlier. And so maybe he wants to shed some hope into a part of your life that might feel a little bit lacking in that department. And so prayer, that's what I would encourage most strongly. And then, of course, there's all the other more quote-unquote worldly preparations, which is the logistics of it all. If you're coming with a group, I'm sure the group leader's taking care of that and making sure you're registered through our website and all the details.
So with hope as the theme, I'm sure you're hoping the experience will help people understand their faith better and have a good encounter with Christ. Can you explain the plenary indulgence and how pilgrims can receive that?
So for the details of how to exactly obtain the indulgence, I would advise to consult the communication put out by the Apostolic Penitentiary. There's a small document explaining exactly how to obtain the indulgence, just so I don't confuse anybody. Then the indulgence itself, well, it's similar to the sacrament of reconciliation. It's meant as a cleansing of sin, but a further cleansing for the consequence of sin that it leaves behind. I once heard it explained as you go to confession and you're forgiven. When you go to confession, you do your penance, you're repentant, and you're forgiven afterwards, after you get the absolution. But then there's still the consequence of the sin committed. And the reality of sin is that it leaves brokenness behind. It leaves this thing in our hearts, which, of course, again, it's addressed sacramentally. It's a sacrament of healing, after all. The sacrament of reconciliation enters into that category. But then the indulgence comes in and wipes out, basically, that's how I heard it explained, that it wipes out the consequence of sin that's left behind. It's meant to be as a sign of a full fresh start, a fresh beginning, to be able to start again anew.
Most people will be familiar with the four holy doors, but there's actually five. Can you tell us about the doors at the major basilicas and number five?
Yeah, definitely. So every one of the four major basilicas in Rome, what are called the papal basilicas, they each have a holy door, continuing on with the tradition for the hundreds of years since the Jubilee, first Jubilee was celebrated. But then, of course, there's the fifth holy door, which the Pope this year decided to open in a prison. Meant to, given that the Jubilee is, again, the Jubilee of hope, meant to bring hope even to a place where many are hopeless, or at least struggle to find hope in the situation that they're in. That there's mercy, because that's also one of the main themes of a Jubilee, receiving God's mercy and forgiveness. That there's mercy for everybody. And I have heard the Pope that always repeats in his homilies over and over again, the Lord forgives everything, the Lord forgives everything. And so I think that was kind of his motivation behind opening a holy door, even in a prison, you could say even in, but then thinking in our human kind of way, when God perhaps finds it a lot less difficult to forgive someone that we might find really, really hard or difficult to forgive.
There are many events taking place throughout the Jubilee year, such as for the sick, for governments, for priests, for education, to name but a few. In April, we have the Jubilee of Teenagers, during which we will see the canonization of Blessed Carlo Acutis. How important will that be in evangelizing and spreading the Jubilee message of hope among young people?
I think Blessed Carlo is a great sign of hope. I myself went to Assisi and went to his tomb, where I saw his body laid out, and he's so young. You know, they have him dressed up in clothes that I would have worn maybe 10 years ago, which is so relatable because it's recent. It's a lot more reachable, a lot more relatable for people of this day and age, especially young people, to look back and say, hey, I can be a saint too. Of course, maybe not everybody in the world will be canonized, but about the shifting the focus from what's worldly into what's heavenly, into shooting for heaven. And so I think also the technological aspect of things, like he was involved in playing video games with his friends. He created a website for all the Eucharistic miracles, which also I think is wonderful because the Eucharist should be at the center of everything, because that's Christ himself after all. So I think it's a great encouragement for young people today to really look for hope in Christ, and where is Christ? As for us Catholics, we find him in a concrete way in the Eucharist.
This is all very exciting if you can get to Rome. Not everyone is going to be able to make a pilgrimage to Rome. What are you encouraging at diocesan level to ensure everyone can experience the blessings of being part of the Jubilee year?
So every diocese is encouraged to, of course, celebrate the Jubilee at a diocesan level for, as you said, the people that can't make it to Rome. Because the reality is that not everybody can come to Rome. There's 1 billion Catholics in the world that would create a lot of havoc in Rome. It would be quite impossible to welcome everybody. But I think there's the Jubilee indulgence as well for people. Even if you can't make it to Rome, you can obtain it by visiting your Jubilee appointed church in your diocese. Usually that's a cathedral, but of course it's up to the bishop of the diocese. And so by visiting it as well, you can obtain the indulgence following the guidelines from the Apostolic Penitentiary that I mentioned before. But there's also the more personal component where people are encouraged to celebrate the Jubilee and take initiative, maybe having a little parish retreat, or even at a personal level within your own family. You know, maybe you've never read the Bible together, you've never prayed the rosary together. Maybe you pray a little together and want to go and take it a step further. I think this is a great year to take initiative to inject hope into your family life as well, into your daily life, into your daily reality. And on top of that, there's the indulgence, like I said, and of course, each diocese is encouraged to have events related to the Jubilee. You could even follow all the events that are set to happen in Rome. You could have similar or inspired by those events, you could have events in your own diocese.
Thank you for talking to us today, Rolando. Lastly, what are your personal hopes and prayers for the Jubilee?
My personal hopes, I would say my main hope is that people experience conversion, that people are able to come and take at least one step closer to Christ, that they might find hope in their relationship with Christ. It's easy to look for hope everywhere but in Christ, because so many things in our life promise hope but deliver so little. So my hope is that, no pun intended, my hope is that people would find hope in Christ, that they would look for it and find it in Christ in their daily lives. That's also my hope for myself as well, to take one step closer in that relationship with Christ and find even more hope from that.
I hope you enjoyed our podcast from Rome looking at the Jubilee 2025 Year of Hope. Please like and leave us a review wherever you listen.